Hey, hello, what's up guys, it's Jamie, aka the FUT Economist, and welcome back to another Market Talk Monday. Today we're going to be looking at the difference between the old and new gen consoles, the Xbox One and the 360, and then the PS4 and the PS3 respectively, and we're going to be looking at what trading methods work best on which consoles, old or new gen. So there are three things that we need to establish first before we can really dive deep and then find out which trading methods work best on which consoles. The first is that this year EA have made it so that there are 4 separate markets instead of 2 markets last year. If you remember, the Xbox One and the Xbox 360 were on the same market last year. This year they're 2 separate markets, and the same thing goes for the PS4 and the PS3. Last year they were on the same market, now they're on separate markets. The second thing that we need to establish is that we can sort of assume that those that upgraded and are playing FIFA 16 on the new console, or bought FIFA 16 and are playing on the new console, that they have more disposable income, or they have more money that they're willing to devote to gaming. And then this third thing is that Legends are only available on Xbox One and Xbox 360, and all these 3 factors are going to play together, and they're going to make differences in prices. They're going to change the elasticity of certain players, and they're going to make it so that different trading methods are actually more effective on one generation of consoles than another. So the first factor that jumps out at me is the income difference. On the new gen, there are more players that are willing to spend money on the game, meaning that the supply of cards is going to be higher since more people are willing to open packs. And also there's going to be a higher percentage of people that have more money or more coins on the game, since they're willing to invest real-world money into the game. What that also means is that demand for higher rated players is going to be inelastic, because the higher rated players are going to make up less of a portion of their income, which means that the prices for those players is going to be much higher. It also means that the demand for the lower rated players is going to be much lower, because obviously they want the higher rated players, while the supply is going to be much higher. And that's going to mean that the prices of the lower rated players are going to be much lower. So when we take that and then compare it to the old generation, there we're going to see players that aren't willing to invest as much money into the gaming, and there's going to be less packs opened, and there's going to be less players that have a lot of coins. Therefore, the demand for the higher rated players is going to be elastic, and the demand for the lower rated players is going to be inelastic. This means that the lower rated players are actually going to be more expensive when compared to the higher rated players on the new gen. An example is Balotelli. On the old gen, he's around 3,200 coins, but on the new gen, he's around 900 coins. And this difference is because on the old gen, the lower rated players are sort of like the highest thing that a lot of players can achieve, and they're willing to pay almost anything for these players that are sort of at the top of their price range. But then on the new gen, this Balotelli, this 82 overall player, is sort of, he's chopped liver compared to, whatever other player you could be buying that's, much better than him, that people are willing to pay far more for. The same goes for Iron Robin. On the old gen, he's far cheaper. Than on the new gen, because on the new gen, players are willing to spend much more money on this Iron Robin card because he's the best of the best, and demand for the best of the best on the old gen is in the new gen rather, is much higher than it is on the old gen, because on the old gen people simply can't afford it. Another factor is going to be important is that there are actually less players, a significantly amount of less players on the old gen than there are on the new gen. What that means is that you can sort of think of that as there's like less police officers, if that's something that could be applied. There's going to be less players that are going to be making sure that the players that are going through the trade block are reaching their fair bidding price. You can sort of think of it as like there's not enough eyes on the market on the old gen at any given time to make sure that for example, that Balotelli actually goes to 3,200 coins. And that means that the old gen is going to be, that market is going to be much more inefficient than the new gen, where there's thousands of players looking at any given card, and the chances of him going, for 600 below as low as buy now is really low, because, one of those 1,000 players would almost certainly bid him up to, his lowest buy now, because, well, I mean, why wouldn't you? We can also know that the new generation consoles, the players on those consoles, are much more likely to spend money on pack openings when EA release some sort of pack special. Say on the new gen, they released a 50k pack special with Hero Ronaldo and packs. Well, there's going to be a lot more players that are willing to react to that sort of incentive that EA have thrown out. And that means that the supply, in contrast to the old gen, where people aren't as willing to spend money on these special pack openings, is going to be way higher on the new gen, meaning that it's going to drive prices way down, much further than what would happen on the old gen for the exact same event. Meaning that over time, not only is the the new gen market much more susceptible to short-term market changes, but it's also more susceptible to long-term sort of macro market changes. It's much more, we see that the trend of prices being low at the beginning, peaking in mid-October, and then dipping towards the end of October is much more clearly expressed in the new gen rather than the old gen. So what does that all mean for us as traders? Well, we can look at first what it means for trading methods. That includes the 59th minute method, the mass bidding method. I'll link those somewhere on the screen. And what it means for those short-term trading methods is that it's going to be much more effective to do those on the old gen. On the old gen, the market is much more inefficient. And that means, and since these short-term trading methods are taking advantage of short-term market inefficiencies, you're more likely to find success on the old gen. That's because, say for example, you're doing the mass bidding technique on the old gen. There are going to be less people watching as your card that you're bidding on goes through the trading block. So there are going to be less of a chance that people are going to outbid you, and you're going to be more of a chance that you're going to get that card, sell it on to make profit. It also means that when we're looking at long-term investing, that it's much more profitable to be investing on the newer generations because they're much more susceptible to sort of mini market crashes, and two, they're much more susceptible to short-term market crashes. We can also look at something with consumables. Consumables are a much better option to invest in the new generation because their demand for them is always there since there are so many more players. But during the mini market crashes, the price of consumables dips a lot, whereas on the old gen, the price of consumables pretty much stays constant pretty much all the time, although there are exceptions like during the Team of the Year, Team of the Season. It also means that one thing that we were talking about earlier, the differences in prices between the lower rated players and the higher rated players, since prices are higher on the old gen for lower rated players, you're going to want to invest in those players. You're not going to, because their prices actually fluctuate the most, and there's the most chance to make margins of profit on the lower rated players. If you're on the new gen, then you're going to actually want to be looking to invest in those higher rated or mid-tier players because their prices actually fluctuate the most. Whereas if you're looking at the lower rated players in the new gen, they pretty much stay at the bottom pretty much the whole season except for the beginning of the game. Alright guys, that's all I've got for the differences between the old gen and new gen consoles. If you got any questions about which trading method worked best for your consoles, leave a comment down below, talk to me on the FUT forums, or talk to me on Twitter. We're going to be doing investment videos, especially for you guys on the new gen where investing is really profitable. If you're excited for those or you're new around here, subscribe. If you like the content, leave a like. Both of them are free. It's been Jamie, aka the FUT Economist. Keep your trade piles full, stay rational, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey, hello, what's up guys, it's Jamie, aka the FUT Economist. I come at you with another video in the Market Talk series. EA